So this video is about how to find meaning in your work if your work is meaningless. And that's sort of a joke, right? I'm being a little exaggerating a little bit, but it really is about this idea that we can't all have like a perfect dream job. A job that we feel like incredibly inspired and this like clear sense of purpose in every single aspect of it. I just don't think it's realistic. I mean, if you find that, that's great, right? And I think in nearly every job, there are some elements of it that we do feel like we're connecting with some sense of meaning and purpose, right? But the idea of this video is just to be real and to say that there's certainly a difference between being like totally pessimistic and negative on one hand, but also being maybe totally delusional or out of touch with reality on the other. But we want us to be real and we want to be optimistic, of course, but we want to be real, right? So as I said, like we can't all have this perfect dream job. So I wanted to make a video on, how can you cultivate purpose and a sense of meaning and satisfaction in your work, and maybe like a less than ideal role. So let's begin by talking about a few different work orientations, which means like how do you relate to your work, and then we'll kind of get into, for each of those, how can you do your best to cultivate meaning and purpose within this, maybe again, less than ideal relationship. So let's start with this, it's called the tripartite model of work orientations. So this is inspired by the work of a couple of sociologists. You have two papers, Bella and colleagues, which was 1985, and then Rosensky and colleagues, 1997. And they basically found the existence of three distinct work orientations. Again, work orientations being like, how do you as an individual relate to your work or approach your work? And these three orientations, they say, are a job, a career, or a calling, with each having a kind of a distinct set of qualities, right? So those with a job orientation view work basically as a means to an end. Like it's a necessary part of life, but it's not really something that defines you. You're basically doing it in order to get resources, get money, get the benefits to live the rest of your life. Okay? Work's kind of transactional. For those who have a career orientation, they seek out opportunities for advancement and tend to approach work as a means to achieve prestige and success. So they're a little more personally invested. They kind of have like a career progression in mind. Maybe you want to climb the ladder a little bit. So it's not necessarily like totally transactional, right? Just I'm working for money. It's more about being successful and kind of getting that status and a little bit of prestige there, which is not necessarily a bad thing, right? But it's just a different way of relating to it. Then finally, there are those with kind of a really deep interest in their work, and it's this calling orientation. So they strongly identify with the work they're doing. They believe it's central to who they are as a person, and they derive personal meaning and a sense of identity from work as a way to positively contribute to the world. So you can see, so you have the job, career, and the calling. Now the calling, we'll start there. Kind of obvious that that's maybe the ideal in terms of trying to get this sense of meaning, purpose, satisfaction, fulfillment, all those good things. And I would encourage you to do the work of pursuing your passion, trying to find your calling. And if you have your calling, great, just go with it, flourish. But again, this video I'm going to talk a little bit about the job and career orientations, because not all of us are going to find that amazing calling that everyone dreams about and we're all taught as kids that we're going to find. It's just not quite reality, okay? So let's talk about job orientation first. Can you still have meaning and purpose if it's just transactional? You're just doing it to get a paycheck. Well, I think you can. And there's a couple ways to do this. Number one is thinking about, how does this work empower you to live your ideal life? So maybe you don't actually love the work you're doing at your job, and maybe you don't even think that your job or your company or whatever has like a great positive impact on the world. But you might think, what do I really value? What's meaningful in my life? Maybe it's my religion or spiritual life. Maybe it's my family. Maybe I have this other hobby, like poetry. Or maybe I love to travel. Whatever it is, right? You can remind yourself that there's a reason you are doing the work you're doing. Even if it is a job, how does this job empower you to live your ideal life? I often, in other videos, I talk about the idea of being a time millionaire and the importance of time affluence, which means feeling like you have sufficient time and control over your time has a lot of psychological benefits and often is more beneficial to our well-being than just making more money. So you might think, how does this job empower me to be free, to use my time how I want to do it, right? So you can start to think about some of those other benefits and connect them into other areas of your life. And another one is, I think, very powerful, is relationships at work. So again, maybe the work itself you don't love, maybe your company, you don't feel like you're super inspired by their mission, but can you have some good friends at work? Right? That's another source of really meaning and purpose that no matter what role you're in, I think even if you're working in whatever the absolute worst kind of professional setting you can imagine, right? Like being stocking shelves at a large department store, right? Like something that you would think a lot of folks really tend to report lower job satisfaction, but connecting with the people around you can be another source of meaning and purpose, even if you still have that sort of job orientation. Okay. So for the job orientation, I'd say the two big ones, right? Connect it to the areas of your life that do inspire meaning. How does this empower me to live life on my terms and live the type of life I want to live in kind of other financial areas of my life? Or look at investing in some of those relationships with the people you work with. Now, if you're in more of this career orientation, what I start to think about is, this means you're probably a little more aligned with the work you're doing and you're kind of invested in it for the long term, and there's parts of it you enjoy and it's maybe a little less transactional and a little more inspiring, right? Because you care about being successful and advancing your career. So I would say, can you maybe shift the work you're doing or your role to be more aligned with being a calling? And the way to do that is to think for yourself, like, what do you most enjoy about the work you're doing? What are your motivated abilities? And that's a very specific term that comes from psychology. Motivated abilities are things that you're good at, the ability, and motivated, you enjoy, you're intrinsically motivated to do them. So you could maybe shift kind of within your role, maybe you have this certain amount of time allocation. Can you play with that a little bit to do more of the things that you enjoy? Maybe doing a little more creative side or a little more coaching and development, right? If you don't enjoy the analytical, or the opposite. If you enjoy the analytical, can you do a little more of that? So playing within that. But also, you can always move internally or even within your industry. So if you're in more of this career orientation and you have maybe a very built up history and you really enjoy your company, or you're an industry expert, right? Maybe there's a different, very senior role at your company that you can transition to that would be more aligned with that kind of calling feeling. Maybe it's a different role within the industry, or you might even think, right, if you're let's say you're a career marketer, maybe you shift from industry into academia. Okay, so I think there are ways to keep this career orientation where you can start to shift a little bit more to, again, having that deeper sense of kind of purpose and meaning that you might find in a calling. And the last part of this, I think, for the career orientation is maybe you're not going to have that kind of calling relationship, but you can focus not so much on the prestige and impact that kind of you're having for yourself, but for the impact you're having on the world. So being sure to connect the work that you and your company are doing, right, the work you've done, to kind of positive impact, whether it's for your customers, other stakeholders, clients, the world as a whole. Right? That will also kind of help to cultivate that sense of meaning and purpose. So in this video, we talked about this kind of idea of just being real with you, that not every job is like your calling, right? Not every job is just this totally inspiring, like obvious sense of purpose and meaning, right? Like I'm not I don't know, Mother Teresa or something, right? But even if you don't relate to your work that way and it's not an ideal role, you can still make some changes to improve that relationship, right? So if you're a job orientation, you can reflect on how it empowers the rest of your life where you do have a little more meaning and purpose. You can focus on deepening your relationships with people you work with. If you're more career orientation, you might think about shifting your role to do more of the activities that you really feel motivated and inspired to do. You might also try to connect with the impact that you're having on people's lives outside of your own. And my last part of this message is simply this, that if you really don't feel a sense of meaning or purpose and that's something that you want, just leave. You have my permission. Not that you need my permission, but I think what you might need sometimes, what we all need, is our own permission. Giving yourself permission to do work that really inspires you and that feels important to you. So I hope you enjoyed this video.